Welcome back to App Stories. Today's episode is brought to you by Telemetry Deck and Jam. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
Doing all right. You know what? We've got the Mac Stories Extended Universe is about to expand by one. It's coming. We've got a surprise for folks coming on Tuesday. So I'm gonna leave it at that for now. But we've got another surprise up our sleeves, and wanted to tell everybody about that. And
yeah, never stop trying new things, especially on the internet. Yeah,
it's the way to survive, is to keep trying new things and refining it over time. But we'll be doing something a little different starting Tuesday. And I also wanted to mention that in the pre-show today, we talked all about text-to-speech engines and some experiments I've been doing with read later apps and how I can integrate them with text-to-speech services and apps and things like that, including a discussion of a few different betas that are out there that really promise to bring text-to-speech to read later in a way that really hasn't been done before. So if you're interested in that topic, you can sign up for App Stories Plus by going to appstories.plus, or you can get App Stories Plus as part of a Club Premier subscription. That's part of Club Mac Stories. It comes with a ton of different perks, including our Discord server, but it also, part of that package, is App Stories Plus. So just go to plus.club to learn about all the perks that are part of a Club Premier plan. Okay, Federico, I had an idea for today's show.
Okay.
And it's a little bit like our classic pick 2 or classic pick 3, whichever one of those versions you want to talk about. But this is a little different. I wanted to go through Apple devices, now that there's so many of them, and just chat a little bit about some of the apps that we've downloaded recently in our testing. Not necessarily ones that are our favorites, but kind of where are our heads at right now in terms of what are the kinds of things we're looking at, and what do we see in terms of trends and apps that have caught our eye along the way in the last couple of months?
Yeah. So where do you want to start?
So I thought we would start with the iPhone, because I think probably the iPhone is where I still download the most apps. Although, I guess recently the Vision Pro may be that, but historically the iPhone's where I download the most apps on a week-to-week basis. And the first app that I want to talk about is an app called Empty Fasting. This is a fasting app that I saw it pop up on social media, and it looked interesting. The UI looked interesting. And I've seen a lot of fasting apps lately, and I wanted to see, I haven't really paid a ton of attention to a lot of them, but I wanted to see what this one was like, because the UI kind of caught my eye. And I got to say, well, first of all, it's a very simple app. So if you're looking for simple, it's a pretty good way to do it. And it basically lets you set the hours that you want to fast for. And then it can give you notifications about, when you're about to start and when you're about to end, that kind of thing. It has widgets as well, and it allows you to kind of track it as like a habit tracker, kind of, where you see like your streak, if that's the kind of thing you're trying to do.
Okay.
The thing that I didn't like about it, and I'm curious what your take on this is that I fired up the app for the first time, and before anything happened in the app, it walked me through a setup process, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with onboarding. But the onboarding started with picking a theme and picking an icon. And to me, for a health and fitness app, like an app that's meant to be kind of like a wellness app, I suppose, because it's about fasting and things, I don't think picking your theme and your icon should be the very first thing that they present you with. Maybe, it's like pick your times for when you're going to fast first, or whether you want to be notified of when your fast is about to end, that kind of stuff. To me, it's a red flag, because to me, that says to me that this app was like a proof of concept for a design more than it is an app that is going to be necessarily maintained. At least that was my the suspicion that it raised in my mind.
Yeah, it's a small thing, but like picking an icon and a theme in the onboarding process, that seems a little strange to me. But that being said, I'm looking now at the app's design. I mean, it looks really nice.
It's a good looking app. Yeah, it's a very good looking app. And I've kept it on my phone. It's like $1. It's not like an expensive app or anything. And I'm going to play around with it and see how I like it. But that did turn me off pretty quickly to the app, which I think was a little too bad. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Telemetry Deck. For someone who makes apps, there's a lot to know. Whether you're a developer, designer, or a product lead, you need to understand how your apps are being used, which features are most popular, and where users are getting stuck. All without collecting personal information because, let's face it, you don't want to be creepy, and you've got privacy obligations as a business for things like GDPR. Telemetry Deck is a privacy-first usage analytics service for mobile and the web. It lets you see exactly how your users are using your app, find and resolve issues faster than ever before, and most importantly, keep your customers happy. Telemetry Deck's features include detailed usage numbers for your app, for individual features and even settings, breakdowns by app version and OS version, usage and movement patterns, A/B testing, funnels to optimize onboarding, paywall, and other multi-step processes, and a whole lot more. Without analytics, app makers are flying blind and guessing whether their apps are being used as intended, and they don't know if people are giving up on their apps in frustration. But building your own analytics is hard to do, and it distracts you from working on your core app. Plus, large analytics services come with privacy implications that can result in legal hassles, risk, and looking creepy to your users. But with Telemetry Deck, it can help you reach a 5-star App Store rating and convert users into paying customers that love your app and recommend it to their friends by collecting usage data that can't ever be traced back to individuals and is completely anonymized. It also includes a large library of pre-made charts that answer the most common questions that app developers have. Plus, Telemetry Deck offers easy-to-use tools allowing you to dive deep into the data and visualize it in ways that make sense for your product. Telemetry Deck is available for iOS, Android, Flutter, and React Native for mobile, JavaScript, TypeScript, and React for the web, and backend and desktop. And of course, it has full Vision Pro support. Telemetry Deck is used by thousands of apps with millions of customers who have gained new insights into how people use their apps, helping them build better apps. Plus, it takes just 10 minutes to install. Telemetry Deck's basic plan is always free, but you can get 3 months of any paid plan with all of the features for free by using the code AppStories at checkout if you're a new customer. Again, that deal for new customers is 3 months of any paid plan with all of its features absolutely free when you use that code AppStories. Just go to telemetrydeck.com/appstories. Again, that URL is telemetrydeck.com/appstories. Check it out today. Our thanks to Telemetry Deck for their support of the show.
Okay, so going through the recently added apps on my iPhone, one that I want to mention is Chronicling by indie developer Rebecca Owen. So I downloaded this because I want to build something. So Chronicling is a sort of like a habit tracking app with a focus on sort of visualizing patterns and habits with charts. And these are like, I believe, the charts that are made possible by Swift UI charts. So it's got that native sort of modern, very simple, but like a very modern feel. And it's mostly like the idea is you have you have multiple days in a calendar, and you can add events for every single day, and you can keep track of those events over time. But what I want to build is something different. So I'm playing around with this app at the moment, specifically because of its shortcuts integration and the shortcuts actions. What I want to build, ideally for Club Mac Stories members, is a way to visualize my completed tasks from things in Chronicling. And going a level deeper, I want to visualize a heat map of my completed tasks on the home screen with a widget.
Okay.
So that's what I'm building, like a complex automation that can run in either two ways. The first mode is an import of all the back sort of the backlog of my completed tasks from, the beginning of 2024. And the other mode is an automation that runs every day at 11:59 p.m. So just before midnight, to sort of fill the Chronicling database with all the tasks that I've completed on a daily basis. And the idea being that then I can go into one of the Chronicling widgets and see all my projects and the tasks inside those projects as dots on a grid with a chart. So it all started because I wanted to replicate. Are you familiar, John, with the GitHub heat map visualizer for the activity in a GitHub repo?
Right.
That's what I wanted to build. And so I started thinking it'd be cool if I could visualize my habits for completing tasks inside projects on iOS and put that in a widget on the home screen.
Oh, that is a cool idea.
Yeah, I started looking at a bunch of different options. And a lot of habit trackers, they have a really sort of opinionated design, or they don't integrate with shortcuts at all.
Right.
The reason I like Chronicling is that it doesn't really, it's pretty bare bones in the sense that it doesn't really have an opinion. It's more data centric, right? Mm-hmm. So it puts the emphasis on just the data, which is what I want. And it has excellent integration with shortcuts. And so I have a first sort of very rough draft of this automation that works, but there's still a few things that I need to figure out. Like, for example, there are some projects that I do not want to track on a weekly basis. Like, for example, every week in my things database, I have a new project for the next issue of Mac Stories Weekly, and that project gets archived on Saturday. And I don't really need to visualize that over time because that project starts on Monday and ends on Saturday. So there's no reason to visualize it, in a widget. And so maybe I need to build this automation in a way that it excludes certain projects. But maybe I could track my main Mac Stories project or my main podcast project and all those sorts of things. So yeah, that's why I'm playing around with Chronicling. And if I can maybe file a piece of feedback, if Rebecca's listening here, I would love when you go into the categories screen of Chronicling and you open a category, it defaults to showing you the activity for today. And I would love to choose a default view. So instead of, when I open, for example, my Mac Stories category, which is a mirror of the Mac Stories project from things, I would prefer to see as the default view, not the past 24 hours, but this week. Right? So choose a default view for when you open a category. That would be really nice. But yeah, that's what I'm playing around with.
That's really cool. One of the heat maps I've seen that I like the most, it's not something that would work for you for this, but it's in an app called Tempo, which is for tracking running and walking. And it does a really nice job with the calendar doing, bigger or smaller circles with different intensities of orange to kind of give you a sense for what were the hard days you worked out and I think that kind of visualization would work for what you're doing if that was in an app that was tracking something other than exercise. The other iPhone app I want to mention, Federico, is Speechify, which I talked about a little bit in the pre-show. So I have been, as I talk at length about in the pre-show, I've been kind of obsessed with text-to-speech as an alternative to read later, because one of the things I do a lot, especially now that the weather's getting warmer here, is I do a lot of walking just for exercise and just to run errands around town. And so I don't always want to listen to podcasts or music. Sometimes I want to catch up on my reading because I save more than I can ever read. And this is just a way to kind of knock that list down even faster. And so I've tried Natural Reader, but the Speechify, I think I like a little bit better. It does a little bit better job of parsing out parts of an article that you don't want to listen to. Like you don't want to listen to long URLs that are embedded into an article or something like that. So it does a better job of getting out things like that, or parentheses or brackets, all kinds of things that you can tweak in the settings. And the voices are quite good. There's a long list of voices. They have some They have some celebrity voices, which I think is kind of silly. You can have Gwyneth Paltrow or Snoop Dogg read to you, for instance, or former President Obama is another option.
No. Go with Snoop Dogg.
Go with Snoop Dogg, yeah. So he's an option, but I use one of the AI voices that's quite good. And I don't know, it's been a kind of nice way to listen to stuff. And I've been on the Mac. You can even download MP3s, which I've been experimenting using those in different ways too, which is another part of what we talked about in the pre-show.
All right, that's a very cool pick. Let me see. I have a couple of things that I want to mention. So the first one is after the sad, tragic passing of Akira Toriyama, the creator, the mangaka behind Dragon Ball, Dr. Slump, and really a bunch of other projects in the video game world, such as Chrono Trigger. I re-downloaded on my iPhone Shonen Jump, which is the manga reading app. Just because I figured, I never actually read Dragon Ball Super, which is the latest installment in the series. And, that was as good a time as any to finally catch up on Dragon Ball Super. So that's what I'm doing on and off on my iPhone and also the iPad. And I also wanted to mention so there's this app called Table of Contents, which I previously highlighted. I highlighted this in Mac Stories Weekly. It's a very simple Safari extension that basically you install this extension in Safari, and then in any article on the web that has multiple sections based on a heading like H2, H3, H4, and so forth, it scans the page and it shows you a table of contents with all the sections from that page. And it works on any website as long as, the website is based on valid HTML. You can try it on Mac Stories. You can try it on the Cloud Mac Stories website. You can try it on Daring Fireball, like whatever. And you just see a list of sections and you can tap on one and the browser scrolls to it. It's just a very simple thing that does this very simple action so well. And it's honestly, it should be something that is built into Safari, but you can just get it as a free extension on the App Store.
Yeah, I love those kinds of extensions. And as soon as I saw you put that one in Mac Stories Weekly, I immediately downloaded it because it's not something I'm going to use every day. But especially if you're reading a really long article or it's something you're researching and you want to jump around back and forth, that'll be really handy to have.
Yeah. All right. My next two are two Vision OS, two Mac apps. So let's switch up categories. What do you have next?
So for Vision Pro, I've got Windora. And this is one that you told me about.
Yes.
It's a really cool app because what it allows you to do, there's a free version so you can get a sense for how it works, and then it's paid if you want more. But it lets you create windows and doorways that use panoramic photos from your photo library as the scenes that you're looking out on through the window or door. So you can create one of these windows, put it over like your own window in your home, and be looking out at some vacation scene from your photo library or something like that. It's a really neat effect, and I've enjoyed using it. It's simple, but it's just a cool way to enjoy this sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's a really clever idea and one that I'm seeing other apps sort of copy the same approach of putting a virtual window in your environment and putting a panorama inside. It's very clever.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Jam. If you're a web developer and you work on a team, you'll know that sometimes your teammates send you bug reports with very little context, like maybe just a text description with no screenshots, no console logs, and no user ID. And instead of fixing it, you have to go to the person who made the ticket and hunt down the right information, or go back and forth over weeks in the ticket comments to find out if it was a local storage API, the response from a network request, cookies at the time zone you're in, and it ends up being frustrating trying to figure out what went wrong. You might have heard of Jam. It's used by more than 90,000 people. That's because it's a free tool that saves web developers and designers a ton of time and frustration. It ensures your teammates make the perfect bug report every time. They literally can't do it wrong. It automatically includes a video of the bug, console logs, network requests, all the information you need to debug, including things like the person's internet speed. It even automatically lists out the steps to reproduce the bug. It's so easy to get your teammates to use because it's just a Chrome extension. When they see a bug, they just click a button and right away it creates a ticket for your issue tracker. So it saves time for them and it saves you a lot of hopping on calls and meetings to debug. If you're a web developer and you would rather spend your time writing code than responding to comments in your issue tracker, send your team jam.dev. That's jam.dev, or just click the link in the show notes. Our thanks to Jam for their support of the show.
On Vision Pro, I am playing around with the Clipboard Manager, which I also think is one of your iPad picks. PacePal.
Yes.
So PacePal, I think it's been around for a while, and I never really played around with it before, but I saw that it had a native VisionOS version, and so I checked it out. And it's a clipboard manager, with the limitations of clipboard manager that you have on iPadOS and VisionOS, but it also comes with a Mac version that is free of those limitations for monitoring the clipboard in the background, for example. It syncs with iCloud, and I really like it because it's got that native feel on VisionOS. It presents things that you copy with, small thumbnail previews, and it supports text and images and links, and it shows you rich links. I just really like the idea of, especially I think on VisionOS, it makes more sense than on iPadOS. Again, given the limitations, because you can just take this window, make it small, and put it in a corner of your field of view, and then you can just look at it and hit paste, and you can quickly archive something. Now, it's not as convenient, of course, as on the Mac, where PacePal always lives in the menu bar and it monitors your clipboard as soon as you copy something, but it works well enough on VisionOS if you put it somewhere in your environment. And it's got shortcuts, actions. It's got widgets on the iPhone, so that's also like something that I have on my iPhone now. I have PacePal on the home screen and a little widget on the Today page. Yeah, it's a good clipboard manager, and I was surprised to see one of these with a native version on VisionOS on day one, I believe, of VisionOS.
Yeah, I've really been enjoying it, and I had it in my iPad category, but I've been using it on all my devices because it syncs via iCloud, and you can create these collections, and I have a collection for each of like the major areas of work we do. So for instance, I can go into the podcast section and I can grab the artwork for any of the shows on Mac Stories, for example. Really convenient thing that I have, because I have to do that from time to time, and it's just there waiting for me. So it's a nice way to do that. There are a lot of apps that do that kind of thing, but I think PacePal does one of the best jobs of kind of integrating with each of the environments that it's on, as well as providing kind of like a really full feature set. Okay, so for the Mac, I'm going to do this one pretty quickly. It's a combo. It's Tower and Kaleidoscope. So Tower,
I had the same apps. Come on.
Oh,
You're
did
stealing
you?
From me?
Oh, I look at you. I realized that I didn't have the Mac on my list.
Yeah, we should talk about this.
All right, we should talk about it together then, because I realized I didn't have the Mac in my list. Shame on me. And I quickly looked to see, using date added, and did a filter to see what my most recent Mac apps are. And it's these two, because we've been working with more writers at Mac Stories, and Devin Dundee's been helping us doing editing and proofreading of articles for everybody. And one thing that's nice is to be able to see what somebody changes. And how do you do that? You use a diffing tool. And we've used GitHub for syncing and sharing articles that we're writing since I think you started doing it right before I started working with you. So it's been like 9 years I've been using GitHub. And I've always used GitHub Desktop, which is GitHub's client for the Mac, which is an Electron app. It's not very good, but it did the job for me because I don't have very sophisticated needs for it because I'm not coding. But Tower is a really cool GitHub client that is fully native Mac app and has just like an incredible number of features. So it was a little overwhelming to me at first, just because I don't need a lot of those features, but it was easy enough to find my way around and figure out how to get two versions and compare them using Kaleidoscope, which is for comparing text files and images and to see the differences. And so I went into Kaleidoscope. They integrate really tightly together. You can pick a couple of different versions in Tower, then immediately open them in Kaleidoscope side by side. I changed the settings a little bit for how it looks in Kaleidoscope. So I think it fits a little better with a text document instead of coding. And it's been a nice way to kind of see what those changes are. Is that kind of how you've been using it too?
Yeah, so Tower is a little intimidating when you first set it up because unlike, for example, Working Copy on iPadOS, it uses a lot more like developer terminology, like sync head to master. Like
yes. It's like, oh no, what am I going to do to this? I was very concerned that I was going to start deleting people's articles when I first was in there.
Yeah, so I do think that first of all, like I gotta say that I would really love to have eventually a Mac version of Working Copy, which is the GitHub client that we've been using forever on the iPad and iPhone. So far, like it's really been an excellent addition to our workflow. But Working Copy, I think it does a nicer job at being like a more user-friendly approach to GitHub. But that being said, once you realize how Tower works, which is it can be a little intimidating, especially if like us, we are writers and we use GitHub to sync Markdown content. We're not programmers. We don't use GitHub to sync like code. And we don't have like different branches of...
we don't have giant teams of people checking out different chunks of code all the time.
Exactly.
It's literally just a sync system that multiple people can go into and make edits to any of the documents.
And we don't make pull requests when we edit each other. But that's fine. So once you realize how it works and you understand like the commits and pushing to the master repo, like what I really like is you go into the history view and I see, for example, Devon edited one of my stories. And if you hover over one of these updates, such as, for example, here, I see Devon's edits and I go over to this entry. And as I mouse with the cursor over the entry, a little button pops up called Diff Tool. Now, the reason I like Tower is that it lets you set up an external diff tool. So that as soon as I click this, it opens that version of the document in Kaleidoscope with the previous version on the left and the newer version on the right. I just need to double click the document and I'm into diff comparison mode, which is an excellent way to see, let me see what Devon changed in my story. And I can review each change one by one. And I really like how I can go from seeing a chronological stream of updates from my repo to comparing two versions of the same documents side by side. This is the kind of thing that developers on the Mac can do, a third-party app that integrates natively with another one. And it's part of the reason why I love so much having a MacPad now, because I get to use these kinds of utilities on a daily basis.
With Tower, you can even select different versions, like not necessarily ones that are like right next to each other, and you can compare those as well, which is really nice too.
Yeah.
Let's see, where should we go next?
Okay, so I want to mention text workflow. So this is something that I also highlighted in Mac Stories Weekly. I rediscovered this app this week thanks to the indie app sales, and also I realized then I went into my email when I discovered these apps that seemed too good to be true. I always open my email and I search for the developer's name, and of course the developer emailed me a year ago about text workflow, and I never replied because I'm so bad at email. So what I did, I downloaded the app, I started playing around with it, I fell in love with it, and I sent a reply to the developer being like, hey, first of all, I'm sorry that I'm over a year late to this reply. I am so bad at email, but I just wanted to tell you that this app is amazing. And the developer is being kind enough to, work with me on a few ideas that I had and a few bugs that I ran into. But yeah, so the idea is that text workflow is a utility that lets you modify text. So for example, you can change the case. You can make text lowercase or uppercase or title case. You can modify lists. You can convert a CSV file into something else. You can modify text to add a prefix or a suffix to text. Like, you have all kinds of text modifications. And there are plenty of utilities like this on the App Store. But the reason why text workflow sort of stands out from the crop of similar apps is there are versions of text workflow for iPhone, iPad, and a native version for the Mac.
Yep.
And there's this ability to create, as the name of the app implies, like these custom workflows, so that you can combine all these text conversions, multiple ones, into a single workflow that is comprised of like a chain of actions. So it's basically like creating your own little shortcut for text. So you can, for example, say, when I take this text, remove an asterisk from it, and then make it title case, and then can become a single workflow that's made out of 3 actions. Then you can take that workflow and run it as an individual action in a shortcut, in the Shortcuts app.
Right.
So it's like shortcuts within shortcuts, really. And I've been taking some time to integrate text workflow actions into all of my custom shortcuts in the Shortcuts app, especially the ones that deal with publishing articles on MacStories, because we want to capitalize headlines a certain way. We follow the Chicago Manual of Style, which the app fully supports. And the developer, I'm going to try and spell this name because I believe it's a Greek name, and I'm sorry if I get this wrong, but I really want to try. Georgos Trigonakis. That sounds Greek enough to me. Man, Greek is such a fascinating language. But yes, so as I was saying, the developer has been super kind. They added support for, you're going to love this, John. You can create an exclusion list of words that should never be capitalized any other way, such as iPhone or Vision OS or Mac OS. And in the next update to the app, this exclusion list will sync with iCloud. At the moment it doesn't, but the developer says that the next update will also make this list sync with iCloud across devices. This is perfect for us because, first, we love fiddling around with text. Second, we love combining multiple actions together into a single routine. And third, we use the Chicago Manual of Style, but we always have our own list of exclusions, such as Apple product names. And this app covers all the bases. It's really an incredible utility if you are geeky and nerd enough to work with text like we do a lot.
That is really cool. I've had this app on my Mac and other devices for a while, and I've used it a little bit here and there. I'm really curious to see what kinds of things you bake it into for some of the workflows you're using for MacStories, because I probably could use it in a similar way. All right, so I'm going to talk about an iPhone app called Prologue, because this app has been around for a long time, and I think that a lot of people don't know about it. It's an audiobook player for audiobooks that don't have DRM. So this would be like things you buy from sites that sell audiobooks that aren't DRM'd, or they could just be MP3s that you burned yourself or whatever it happens to be. But if you have a DRM-free audiobook, you can drop it into a folder on your Plex server, and then Prologue will allow you to stream that audiobook wherever you happen to be using your Plex server. It's a really cool idea. It's not done, I think, by anybody else. I have seen, music apps that use Plex as a server system, but never audiobooks. And the developer has announced that they're coming out with a watch app. And I think that that's going to be really cool because it'll allow you, as I understand it, it's going to allow you to both download locally to your watch so you can go out without your phone, or you can stream to the watch as well over the internet, because obviously Plex works that way. So it's a neat app that I think doesn't get as much attention as it should. And if you enjoy audiobooks and you have a Plex server, I think it's worth playing around with this one. All right, Federico. Well, that's a good crop of apps. We're always downloading things. We should do this more often because, it's
almost like we do this for a living.
It's almost like we do. And it's very true that we have more apps on our devices than we can ever get around to writing.
True.
So this is a nice way to kind of highlight some of the ones that we've tried that we think are interesting, even though we haven't necessarily written about all these in the past. I want to thank our two sponsors again for this episode. That's Telemetry Deck and Jam. You can find the two of us over at macstories.net. Federico and I are on Mastodon too. Just go to viticci.macstories.net and johnvorhees.macstories.net to follow us there. And we're on Threads and Instagram. Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.